sir. Aviation Cadet Dunham reporting.
You're just the man I want to see.
Not so good, is it, sir?
And what was this supposed to be?
That's supposed to be what happens when you turn the azimuth knobs. I mean, like when you're trying to kill drift.
And how do you kill drift?
Well, you turn the rate knob out of detent until the target finally stops moving. Then you turn it back just fast enough until the target's still. Then it's back in detent. That's the way I do it on the ground trainer. Then when the drift's killed, you correct for cross trail, getting back on the target with the 1-to-1 system. That's where you use the displacement knob with the search switch pressed in.
Now, while you're doing all that, any idea what's happening to the plane? Why that target stops moving?
Well, the plane's going this way and your line of sight's going this way. I'll be darned if I know what's going on.
Dunham, you're not the brightest student in my class. On the other hand, you're not the dumbest. So you're going to understand what happens when you turn those knobs if it kills me. What do you want to be? A bombardier or just a knob twiddler? Here's an airplane, complete with sightline. And there's the ground track of an airplane making a normal bombing run. Well, go on, show me what happens.
Me show you?
That's right.
Well, first you've got to pick up the target with the displacement knob.
Okay, you move the telescope free of the airplane. That plane isn't standing still, you know. See what I'm doing to that sight line?
Yes, sir. I see what you mean. It's on account of the azimuth gyro holding the sighting line in the same direction. Looks like the target's drifting away. Hey, that's what drift is.
Now what?
You gotta kill that drift, I guess. On the bomb sight, you turn the rate knob out of detent. That would turn the plane
About 8 times as fast as it moves the line of sight back toward the target.
Look, the ground track's just the same as the sighting line now.
Is that bad?
No. Just like you said in class, drift's killed when the line of sight and the ground track coincide. See what I mean?
I think I get it.
That's where you'd use the 1-to-1 system, the displacement knob, but this time with the search switch pressed in. That means you're turning the plane and sight line equal amounts.
Well, that's how one instructor helped one cadet out of the fog he was in. From then on, he did his own figuring. Sometimes on the floor with the same kind of cutout the instructor used. But mostly he worked it out in his head. First of all, he reviewed what the instructor had shown him. How first you pick up the target with optics free of the airplane. Then you clutch in. If you find the target's drifting off, you start turning the sight line and the airplane back toward the target. Only you turn the airplane much faster than the sight line until your ground track overtakes your sight line. And that's when drift is killed. After that, you turn your airplane and your sight line back on the target, but this time both at the same rate. That business of the ground track having to coincide with the sight line, he proved for himself another way. By moving a ruler along at a tangent to the curve in his ground track, just to make it stick in his mind. From here on, he started figuring a lot of other things out for himself. Like what would happen if he kept on using his rate knob after he'd killed his drift. He could see now that driving the crosshairs onto the target would only give him opposite drift. because the ground track would go beyond his sight line. And what would happen, he wondered, if he used the one-to-one system for the entire run? It's true he could get the line of sight back on the target just by turning his displacement knob. But since he'd be turning his line of sight and his airplane at the same amounts, his ground track could never overtake his line of sight, and so he'd never kill his drift. So what good would it do him to keep the crosshairs on the target? Next, he had to straighten himself out on that rate knob. How the further it is turned away from detent, the more rapid the change in course. In other words, it isn't how fast you turn it, but how far. Now he was ready for another run. Let's take it with him. After you've picked up the target, you clutch in. Since the gyro is holding the sight line in azimuth, the target moves away from the vertical crosshair. You move your rate knob out of detent. And you keep it out of detent, which means the airplane is turning faster than the sight line. The rate of the turn depends on how far out of detent you are. When the target begins to slow down, you move the knob back so that when your ground track and your sight line coincide, you're back in detent. Then to get back on the target, you use your displacement knob with the search switch pressed in, until finally you're on a collision course with no drift and the target smack under your vertical crosshair.